So we're starting our March series, and the March series is based at some level on our power for this month. I don't always sort of sync it up, but somehow Spirit was just calling me to really do a deep dive into this idea of wisdom. And March as a whole, I'm sort of looking at how ancient wisdom is something that we really need to connect with as a community. How can we promote and highlight ancient wisdom, and what can it tell us? And how can it allow us to heal? How can it allow us to be part of an energy of healing justice? And justice is a word that has been tainted in our culture, I feel. And so when we're talking about justice, we're just talking about harmony. We're talking about balance. We're talking about peace. And when you have all of that, right, you have healing. And so the March theme is that. And so today, what I want to talk about is the wisdom of anger. Now, does that sound strange to anyone, how anger can have wisdom? Sounds strange, doesn't it? Like there's no way. Those of us who have gotten mad, right? Those of us who have kind of stepped in some poo-poo because of our anger, right? Have maybe fractured friendships or relationships or even lost a job. You can't really access that when you think about that as being anger. But I'm going to invite you into that today. You know, anger in our culture has gotten a bad rap. And it's mainly because we don't distinguish between anger as an emotion and maybe anger that leads to acts, and acts where are different. Anger is the emotion. The acts that come from that become aggression or violence or oppression. And so we're going to tease that out here today so we're understanding that. You know, we've been taught that anger is a bad thing, that we need to control it, that we need to ignore it, that we need to suppress it. And some of that is true in a sense, but mostly what we're talking about here today is how do we transform it. We're not trying to deny it. We're not trying to suppress it exactly. We're trying to transform that anger. Allow it to be something that is for our greatest and highest good. Something that we let go of as tainted with shame and blame. Anybody get that, right? With anger, there's shame around that. We shouldn't be angry. We should know better as unity people, right? How dare us? But the truth is that anger becomes a valuable ally when we understand it. It's not an adversary to be defeated. And frankly, there are some of us here that actually need to be angry. Ooh. Let me tell you a little bit about kind of what came to me with this. I shared with y'all back in January when I came back from Mexico that, I'm not going to go through the story, but I was in line to get on the plane to come back to the States, and there was a woman who was trying to jump the line in front of us. And I was just really angered and upset by that. And it really shocked me to think, you know, here I'm like, I'm a minister, right? I shouldn't be angry, you know? And there I was in the airport out of something so little. And so I started to notice since then all the things that kind of get underneath my skin. I was at Plaza Mariachi a couple weeks ago, and that's an entertainment venue here in Nashville. And they were celebrating a Black History Month, and they had this amazing program with dancers and musicians and all of this. And so I'm sitting, you know, with my wife, Veronica, and we're watching the show, and then this woman's sitting next to us. And I see this other woman looming, right, trying to find a seat, because it was like standing room only, it was packed. So I see her trying to find a seat. And so I thought, I'm going to watch you, right? So when the woman next to me gets up to go get a drink or the bathroom or what have you, what does she do? She takes her chair. And I was like, what? How dare you? You know? And so I went into this moment of like anger, and I just went, that's just somebody sitting there. You can't take that chair. And she's like, oh, okay. And so it was in that moment that I was like, what's happening? Why are these little things like really unearthing me? And I remember sharing that with my wife, with Veronica, and she said, well, it's probably the little injustices that you're seeing that maybe make up the big injustices. And it was like, that's it. Where I'm looking at all of these little things that I'm angered about, but it's really all these bigger injustices that all those things reminded me of that I really wasn't ready and willing to come to terms with. And so part of my talk today and part of my sharing with you is for all of us, I'm not anything unlike you. I'm like you in the sense that I'm struggling with these things too. It's how do we then get into that space where we allow ourselves to be angry, but transform it and understand it. I'm going to go into a little bit for information here for us to sort of level set from our Buddhist brothers and sisters, because I think they really have a lot of good stuff down around this. And there's a distinction between the idea of anger, as I said, and aggression. Anger is the emotion. Aggression and things that we take then from that emotion and act on becomes something different. According to Buddhism, aggression is one of the 3 poisons that drive our suffering. What defines aggression is the ego. Now, we have a great quote that I want to share with you all from Melvin MacLeod, who's the editor-in-chief of Lion's Roar, a magazine of Buddhist wisdom for our time. And this is what he says. He says, aggression is the energy of anger in the service of all we define as self, ready to attack anyone and anything we deem a threat. But when anger is released from its service to the ego, it ceases to be aggression and simply becomes energy. The pure energy of anger has wisdom and power. It can even be enlightened. In its pure awakened form, when it's not driven by ego, anger brings good to the world. Sounds a little strange. Let's hear that again. Anger brings good to the world. In our own personal lives, it helps us be honest about our own foibles and have the courage to help others see how they are damaging themselves. And on a bigger scale, anger is the energy that inspires great movements for freedom and social justice, which we need so badly now. It is a vital part of every spiritual path, for before we can say yes to enlightenment, we must say no to the poison of aggression. Traditionally, it is said that enlightened energy of anger is the wisdom of clarity. It is sharp, accurate, and penetrating insight. It sees what is wholesome and unwholesome, what is just and unjust, what is enlightenment and what is ignorance. Seeing clearly, we lay the ground for action. If Buddhism offers us one piece of good news, it is this. In our basic nature, we are enlightened, and our anger is really wisdom. Interesting, So what is anger then? So we've got some sense here from that, the distinction between what we're talking about, let's say for just this conversation, the anger and the aggression. And anger, as I said, is the emotion. So how do we understand what anger is? What is anger? I think of it as a smoke signal. When we're angry, sometimes, right, the smoke coming out of our ears maybe. But it's that smoke signal that's saying something is not right. Something is happening. Something is preventing us from experiencing harmony and wholeness in our relationships, in our lives, with ourselves. And so recognizing that within the fury of anger, there might be a quiet statement of your needs and your worth. Maybe it's a feeling that you don't have worth that needs liberation. Your anger is signaling to you that something is off balance. Rather than judging your anger as inappropriate, you can validate the genesis of your anger. Where does your anger come from and why? Anger arises when you feel you've been wronged, when there's an approaching danger, when something you value is being interfered with, blocked, or denied. Anyone been there? Validating anger can free you from acting out in your anger to become aggression or violence or oppression, etc. By taking on this perspective, we shift our relationship with anger. And rather than connecting with anger's urge to act, right? Anger's urge to, let me say that nasty thing to somebody. Let me do that nasty thing to someone. Let me act out passive aggressively and ruin their life, right? Or ruin some aspect of something I want, right? So we're connecting with that anger to be able to not have it create us in an action or anger's bodily feelings where we're allowing that anger to then go inside and make us literally sick. So it's not allowing that anger to sort of go out and act or go inwards and act upon us. It's allowing us to transform it. And then when we allow it to be, we're allowing for its legitimacy, its worth, and therefore our own worth in this. This shift, in turn, frees you to grow through your anger. Because you've understood the message with the anger may not need to arise then as often or as intensely. So when you deal with what that anger is, where is it coming from, allowing it to be, then you allow a safe space for it to maybe just ease out or not be as strong. When we think about this, there's something else I want to share with you when we think about allowing this being of anger. One of the greatest monks that recently transitioned, Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book, Anger, Wisdom for Cooling the Flames, says this: anger is like a howling baby, suffering and crying. The baby needs his mother to embrace him. You are the mother for your baby, your anger. The moment you begin to practice breathing mindfully in and out, you have the energy of a mother to cradle and embrace the baby. Just embracing your anger, just breathing in and breathing out, that is enough. The baby will feel relief right away. Embrace your anger with a lot of tenderness. Your anger is not your enemy. Your anger is your baby. It's like your stomach or your lungs. Every time you have some trouble in your lungs or your stomach, you don't think of throwing them away. The same is true with your anger. You accept your anger because you know you can take care of it, and you transform it into positive energy. So again, we're trying to reinscribe how we've been programmed to think about anger here. We're trying to understand that it's not in and of itself. See, he's saying amen, right? Yes. Alexander's saying, yes, I am angry right now because I'm hungry. But that's part of it, transforming it and not acting out. How many of us have been angry, and in the heat of the anger, we have sent that text message? Or that email, right? We've done that. We've all been there. We've all done that, where we've acted out in our anger. But here's what he says: to not use anger in our acts of aggression to aid in our conflict or our pain and destruction. That is not going to lead to really us helping ourselves and helping the situation. Here's what he says, and this is such a great kind of way to think about it. If your house is on fire, the most urgent thing to do is go back and try to put out the fire, not to run after the person you believe to be the arsonist. If you run after the person you suspect has burned your house will burn down while you're chasing him or her. That is not wise. You must go back and put out the fire. So when you're angry, if you continue to interact with, you argue with the other person, if you try to punish him or her, you're acting exactly like someone who runs after the arsonist while everything goes up in flames. Been there? So the idea is to focus, to take that sacred pause, to take that breath, to take that beat, and instead of acting out from the anger, try to explore it, try to understand it, try to see where we're at with it. And that is difficult. That often, if not always, takes courage. You know, anger is something that we see even in our way shower, Jesus Christ. You know, one of the most famous times that you see sort of Jesus flagged as being angry is in the passage where it's called the cleansing of the temple, when he gets angry at the money changers. Anybody remember that? So I'm going to just read a little bit. It's very short, but I think it's really important for us to go to scripture on this and just read a little bit. So then they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, "It is not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayers for all nations.' Is it not written that my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you've made it a den for robbers." What happens there? What is happening? We think about it, wow, some of us think about it as, well, Jesus got angry and I don't feel so bad, right? If even Jesus got angry, well, I'm not feeling that bad, right? And that is true. That's possible. That's one interpretation. But another take on this could be, let's think about this. What we know about Jesus and what we know about this man that potentially was historical called Jesus is that he was a master teacher and he was a spiritual provocateur. So it's possible that this was just a tactic to wake people up. See, let's go historically, what's happening in that time so we can really understand this passage. People are coming from all over the Jewish diaspora, from all over the area to come to the temple. It's Passover, a very important time in the Jewish culture, right? A spiritual, super spiritual time. So they're all coming, and they're coming to the temple. And one of the things they have to do as part of this sacred act, or this sacred time, is to give an offering. And so usually those offerings are animals. Now, in Scripture, we know that it is okay for people who don't have the means to bring a dove. So there's something specific about that. So he flags the people that are sitting selling doves. So that's also part of they have to come, they're coming to celebrate, they're coming to pay homage, they're coming to do kind of their sacred act, and they have to do this sacrifice. But what happens? They have a very specific currency that is only accepted in the temple. And so people are coming with all their currency from different places in the realm, right? So they have money changers there that are then charging a price to do the exchange. And what's happening is they're charging an exorbitant price. And they're even charging, it's potentially thought of because he flags the doves, as charging a really high rate to purchase a sacrificial dove from people who are already poor. So there's a context here that I want us to understand. It's not just something that he's getting angry about. It is a statement that he is making about the times. And he's making a statement at the same time about what we as Christians, as New Thought people, as people of love and light, need to understand and to be a part of. What we need to let go of in this moment. People were acting who were in power in the interest of themselves. And they were acting on their interest for power and for gain, economic and material. Now, Jesus has anger about this, but the anger is, in a sense, a transformation for him. It looks like an aggression, but I want to suggest to you that it was very It was a tactile thing. It was a strategy for him to wake people up. Like, do y'all see what are happening? At the time, there was throngs of people there in the temple, people who followed him. And so the Pharisees didn't engage with him and didn't challenge him because they knew that it would be potentially not so good in their favor because they were challenging Jesus, who was supported at that time. But he's trying to raise the consciousness of people in that act, turning over the tables so that they're being discomforted, so that they're being in a state of maybe critical thinking about what's happening, what do I need to think about? That's one piece. The other piece I want to offer you is the metaphysical piece, which is the piece that is part of how we understand Unity Bible. Metaphysical meaning beyond what's happening on the pages. It's about more the mysticism of it, the metaphor of it. And this comes from Reverend Ed Rabel, who is a very well-known Unity minister, has since transitioned from a lecture in January 23rd of 1976. He says, to me, the money changers in the temple who need their tables reversed in order to correct their situation very logically points to the idea of money changer in my temple, meaning any place in the inner being where I have established a wrong sense of values, where I have put money ahead of worship, or any other words, any sense of priorities or values I have allowed to be established in me where I am not putting God first. Any creep into me wherein something other than God or truth is first. This is a money changer in my temple. And when it says that Jesus overturns their tables in order to cleanse the temples, it tells me that anytime I allow my spiritual awareness to reverse a sense of wrong values, of wrong sequence, of wrong priorities, and when in wrongness this is reversed, then that's what we have, rightness. Where I overturn a wrong priority or wrong sense of value, then that which comes first is God, the truth. So part of our exploration here is looking at Jesus as an example of what is it that he's talking about from the historical, from the political, from the spiritual context, but also what does it mean for our lives? You know, what are our money changers? What are the things within us where we need to overturn those tables? And therein lies accessing that anger. Where is the ways in which we have not placed God first, or spirit first, or the eternal truth first, or however you want to think about that spirit that moves and breathes in you as you. Call it what you want. But this is what we're talking about. What have you put first before that God? And so the money changers is the idea in our minds that must be overthrown. That's how we understand it from a metaphysical perspective. And so I ask you all today, what tables must you turn in your life? As I move to conclude, I want to share with you again a little piece from the same author, Melvin McLeod, who's the editor of Lion's Roar magazine. And he says, when the energy of anger serves ego, again, it's aggression. When it serves to ease others' suffering and make the world a better place, it's wisdom. We have the freedom to choose. We have the power to transform aggression into the wisdom of anger. There is no greater victory for us and for the world. So we understand that anger has a creative force. It is both constructive and that it motivates us to look at our lives. It motivates us to improve ourselves and to create peace and harmony in our lives. And it's a protective factor in that it's instinctive. It's something that is signaling something is not right, that we have to listen to. That gut reaction, something is not right here. What do I need to look at? What do I need healing around? What do I need peace in? And so we use anger not to hurt other people, not to legislate against other people. We use anger to be able to have a purpose where ultimately it's for healing and for peace and for growth. It's a practice of mindfulness and a practice of kindness. See, I want us to understand this distinction because anger, we can be angry about things. We can be angry at political figures. We can be angry at the world. We can be angry at the news. We can be angry at all of these things, but those are emotions. How do we transform them to then move in a state of love, not out of that anger? This is where the spiritual rubber hits the road. Because what we see oftentimes is people operating from their anger that then turns to aggression. We can have those feelings of threat. We can have those feelings like our world order is being changed. We can have those feelings like we're losing power. But it behooves us to then understand why we're angry and not to move out in the world and hurt people. Does that make sense? For me, it is important that we as a unity movement understand the distinction, because if we don't, we end up doing what all the other people do that we say we are not like. Do we hear that? We are people of love and light. We are not people that, again, we can get angry, but we cannot act against anger. We cannot be acting in anger. And if we're doing that, we are not on purpose. We are not on mission. So that is what we bring to this world, is an understanding that we can be angry, but we move with love. We can be angry, but we are going to meet you with love. We are going to be angry, but we are going to move in truth to say, this is my brother, this is my sister, this is somebody who I want to move to stand in love with and be their protector at some level. Do we hear this? There are so many things happening. This is what I said. Part of this for me is understanding where my anger is coming from and how I want to transform it. Oftentimes, there's so many things happening in this world that are so dark and so tragic and so angering that we don't know what to do. Yes? Yes. We don't. But here's what we do. We take it piece by piece, and we take it in love, and we allow ourselves to feel that, and we allow ourselves to get angry. We should be angry. If you all have been a victim of injustice, you have a right to be angry. If you were raped, you have a right to be angry. If you were a victim of incest, you have a right to be angry. If anyone has wronged you or harmed you or put something in your way or to your body that you didn't want, that you should be angry at. Yes? Yes. We have to be okay with getting angry. See, this is a thing with New Thought. We're like, well, we're just going to pray. We're going to be nice. And that's good. We are praying people. But we also have to access that holy fire within. We also have to stand up and rise up to say, no, this is not okay. This is not what Jesus said. This is not what Jesus intended. This is not Christianity. Who are you and why are you doing this? Angela Davis said that we can accept the change, the things that we cannot change, but really we must change the things that we cannot accept. Where are we on that? What are the things that we can no longer accept as okay? We must get angry about that, and we must move, and all of us will have a different trajectory. Some of us will pray. Some of us will move to other kinds of actions or do different kinds of things, and that's all fine and well. We all have a place. What is your divine purpose in this? Where are you in terms of moving light and love out into the world? It is everyone's charge. It is not just my charge as the minister. It is everyone's charge here to be the light and love of the world. Where do you stand on that today? I offer you that anger as a rally cry, not as an aggression. Remembering that, as Martin Luther King said, love is the only thing that will drive out hate. Hate will not drive out love. I don't know if you all know, but there are at least 385 bills targeting LGBTQ rights that have come into this country since the beginning of the year. That was a March 7th statistic, 385 bills around the country, and that is much more. It was 306 for the total year of 2022. So I offer you that as something to think about. We have transgender brothers and sisters in this congregation. One of the people that I was ordained with is a transgender minister in Unity. Where do I stand on that? I have to stand for something or I will fall for anything, as Martin Luther King said. So I invite you all today. I invite you all today to start turning some tables. We need to turn some tables in this city. We need to turn some tables in our lives, because if we don't, we will look back in a few months or in a few years and not recognize love. Do you all hear me on that? We must stand for love today, now, and always. And so it is. Amen.